So I was just thinking about higher education, and I was just really, puzzling. Literally, it was like an hour ago of thinking about, um, is it better to send your kids to a public institution or to send your kid to a private institution? And probably shouldn't name names, but I was thinking about like places like Princeton and Yale and Harvard and all of those kind of places. And the truth is, I actually think it does make a difference to send your kids to these sort of private institutions, but not in the way that everybody sort of assumes that it does. And the difference, I don't think, pans out in the very long run. And here's the difference. The difference is not necessarily the education that you get. I think that that's an important thing, but it's a signaling effect. It's a sort of clearing of the market that you might actually get some opportunities that are given to you over a long time. Um, Now, does that negate the fact that you cannot be successful in any other particular arena, and as well with like a private institution, are you going to be not as successful, or is it possible to not successful, right, from a private institution? The answer is absolutely yes, right? There's plenty of buffoons that go to private schools, and they end up doing like really dumb things with their life. And there's also plenty of people that just live ordinary lives after they lived and went to some highfalutin school. Now, the same thing can be said with a public institution, right? So, in my state, there's places like the University of Florida, there's Florida State, there's Central Florida. Like, there's a bunch of state schools, and yes, you could be extremely highly successful. And without those particular opportunities that are given to you, and the way that you do that is you build and you make your own opportunities. Not unlike what would happen if you went to a private institution as well, right? You still have to build and make those opportunities, but it's just a little easier at the beginning when it actually sort of makes a difference in terms of the long run impact, right? In terms of how much money you're going to make and all of that kind of stuff. But, collectively, the trouble, um, and, I sort of puzzle about this and try to look for good evidence about this. And, the puzzle is, does this have a long run effect on average across everybody? And I would argue, I sort of keep puzzling about this, and I have not seen any sort of great evidence that gives me sort of a confirmation. I would argue no. I don't think it makes a difference over the long run on average across everybody. Um, Now, here's the challenging thing. Does that still mean, and this is sort of a play with statistics, does this mean that you can't get an extraordinary bonus or punch up by going to a private institution, and you are having the right sort of background, the right setting, all of that kind of stuff? I would suggest, if and I think this may be true, if you were to identify the right candidate, that will perform well, I think that they would actually get a bump up from private institutions. And I'm not talking about private institutions across the board. I'm just talking about very elite schools that are well recognized, that I consider private institutions. I'm not a big fan of the basic liberal arts college, the sort of simple, or any of the sort of you know um, Bible colleges and things like that. And the reason is that they're financially just not very good investments in general, because they don't have the cachet, the brand. as well as just it's really difficult to know whether you're actually getting a good education at those particular institutions. Now, the way that the higher education market works in general is that some of the top professors do float up to the very brand name schools, the Harvards and the Dartmouths and all of those particular places, right? Like they do float up because they pay so much money, right? And they end up floating to those particular institutions, the Notre Dames and those things. But across the board, do I think that your education is just as good in a public institution? Yeah, I do think so. They're just a different characteristic that you get at a private institution. And there's sort of differences that happen. There's lots of different cohort effects. But a big part of that is the sort of signaling that you get to other people and how other people actually view you. Now, the issue is, for me, um, given the chance, and this is a sort of challenging thing that I was thinking about just moments ago. If your kid had the ability to get into both, and one of them was, quite a bit more money, private institution was quite a bit more money compared to getting a public institution, what would you do? And I think the answer I was thinking in my head, I think it really just depends on the person that's actually involved, in terms of what they would do and how they would sort of handle things. If you have a belief that your kid is going to do better in one or the other, I think you should stick with that particular belief. Um, but then know that there's often a significant cost to that. I'm not saying that you don't see effects from paying more for education, but I'm just saying that there's significant costs that you have to weigh in terms of who that person is. And then think about the decision almost in a very financial, rational, boring way of thinking about, does this actually make sense for me and my family, given who this particular kid is, given how much money it's going to cost, all of these sort of different factors. But I would just narrow it down to some basic things. Have a list of 3 or 4 questions of thinking about, is this, are they going to perform better in this particular scenario? And for almost everybody, the answer is no. A private institution is not worth the money. But for the right circumstance, the right individual, the right one that wants to take advantages of things over the course of, and that's the hard part as a parent, because you believe all of your kids want to do that, but it's just not true, right? You have to sort of recognize that each kid and it is different and they perform different in different ways. All right, take care.